Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acton Creative, and this is A Handwoven Experience. In today's episode, I'm going to help answer the question, what do we weave next? If you are sitting in your space, looking at a very naked loom, thinking, what do I weave next? What is the next winner to go on my loom? Maybe a twill. Nah, I've already done twill. Or have you? You see, twill is a very big category and there's so much to explore. So today's episode is the first of a two-part series all about twill weaving ideas. There are a lot of twill-based patterns out there in the weaving universe, and I have no doubt that you have explored some of them. However, there still may be a few that you haven't dipped your toe into yet. So my job is to get you excited about some twill weaving patterns and maybe help answer the question of what goes on to the loom next. In today's part one of our twill weaving ideas, we are going to explore some classics: Houndstooth, Herringbone, and Pinwheels. Friends, these are some beautiful, fun, creative patterns that you can explore, and they're just twill. That's all they are. So even if you're just starting your weaving journey, if you tried a little touch of twill, friend, you are in good shape. You got this. So without further ado, let's enjoy our twill weaving ideas part one and take a look at some Houndstooth, Herringbone, and Pinwheels. Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acton Creative, and this is A Handwoven Experience, episode 78. And in this episode, I am going to give you the Houndstooth how-to. So this episode is all about a Houndstooth check. Are you familiar with this pattern? So you know what a check pattern is, right? Think like a checkered board with all your neat little squares. A Houndstooth check takes those squares and gives them little jagged edges. It was made popular by Christian Dior in the 1940s, and it has with it kind of a classy upscale kind of vibe. When you see a Houndstooth check, in a lot of cases it'll be in wool on a beautiful jacket. It just kind of screams money, if you know what I mean. That's kind of the impression that goes with a Houndstooth check. But for all its elegance and kind of upscaledness, it's a pretty easy pattern to do. So today I'm going to walk you through what it looks like to create your own version of a Houndstooth check. First of all, at the core of it, a Houndstooth check is a twill. That's all. Specifically, it is a 2-2 twill, which means that at any given point in the pattern, you always have two shafts lifted and two lowered, which also means that the top and the bottom of the fabric are going to look the same, which is kind of a nice little perk. But it's a 2-2 twill. That's all it is to it. The magic of a Houndstooth check is the colors. Now, typically you'll see it all in black and white. I did a little playing here and I used a light green and a black just to be different. So as you're setting up your loom, it is just a straight draw. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There is nothing crazy in the threading as you are putting your yarns through the heddles. Nothing crazy, straight draw. The kicker is you need to have an even number of your two colors. So if you have 4 black, then you have 4 white, then you have 4 black, and you have 4 white, on and on and on. So then to create the pattern, you're using your twill, and in your shuttles, you're doing 4 black and 4 white, and 4 black and 4 white. That's how you create that iconic kind of jagged little square shape. Now, like I said, I did a little bit of playing here, and I'm going to take you closer so you can see exactly what creates a Houndstooth check. So here we are, up close and personal with my Houndstooth check project. Now, As I mentioned before, Houndstooth check is noticeable because it has just the 2 colors. Now, I wanted to play with that. So you'll see in my project, I have a light green as the common color throughout, and then I picked a variety of other colors. I've got black here, I've got 2 dark greens here, and then a white. So I was just playing here to see what really makes a Houndstooth check tick. And here's what I discovered, my friends, is that to create the classic kind of jagged square shape, you need to use exactly the 2 colors that you have in your warp in your weft. Because look at this little nugget right here. See this little section? This is the classic Houndstooth right there. As I move to my right here, you can see the other colors. It kind of dissolves. It doesn't keep the shape because it doesn't have the same 2 colors. It becomes a very pretty 2-2 twill, but it's not a Houndstooth check, not as we traditionally think about it. So the key is really to use exactly the same 2 colors. So I've got black and green here, I've got black and green here. That is how you create that kind of classic look, the Houndstooth check that we're looking for. Now, I want to mention one thing here is because we're working with a twill, highly recommend that you use some floating selvages. Because of the nature of the 2-2, there's gonna be times when you are gonna be lifting certain yarns. That means that your weft won't go all the way to the edge. So just put in a couple floating selvages there and make your life much easier. But now you know the trick to creating a Houndstooth check. Use the same 2 colors in your warp as you do in your weft, and you will get that great kind of Christian Dior classic pattern. And that is your Houndstooth how-to. Pretty easy, huh? I can't wait to see your personal version of a Houndstooth check, because you can do it. It's a great pattern, even for a beginner. Very manageable. All right, friends, have a great week. Go forth and weave something incredible and fun and maybe classic. Have a good one and happy weaving. Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acton Creative, and this is A Handwoven Experience, episode 120. And in this episode, we're going to discuss the very hip herringbone. I think herringbone is so interesting because while we like to claim it in the weaving world, people talk about a herringbone pattern in a lot of different areas, for instance, in flooring, right? You'll hear someone discuss that the tile was laid in a herringbone pattern. So I love that it extends beyond our little fiber worlds. But for today, I'm going to discuss just our little fiber world. So herringbone is a twill. And if you're not familiar, here is what it looks like. I'm sure you've seen this pattern before. Maybe not in fabric, but in floors or other places, right? Herringbone is a twill, like I said, and that means that we have some things to consider as we construct our own herringbone pattern. First of all, because it's a twill, we're gonna need some floating selvages. Here's what those are. If you look at my fabric I have going here, see my little guy floating right there, just hanging out above all the rest of the yarns. I have one on each side. Those are floating selvages. And what they do is that they guarantee that my weft yarn will always go to the edges of the project. Because of the nature of the pattern, this is a nice kind of safety net to have in place. So it's your shuttle is always wrapping around a floating selvage and it always goes to the edge. Otherwise, you can end up with some odd gaps in your fabric. So first off, include some floating selvages. We're working with twill, so they go hand in hand, right? Next up, it's all about the threading. And for herringbone, we need a broken twill threading. Now, I just did an episode 119, all about broken twill threading. So if you didn't catch that, after you watch this one, go back and do a little refresher. It'll help things for sure. But a broken twill threading refers to how we are putting the warp yarns into the shafts, the sequence we're using to do that. And when you're thinking about a herringbone pattern, basically you have a certain sequence where all your yarns are aimed one direction and they stop and there's a break and then they all aim the other direction and back and forth and back and forth. That's how you're creating these kind of cool columns of diagonals that are indicative of a herringbone pattern. So broken twill threading. That's what you're gonna need for our herringbone pattern here. What I think is so interesting about twills in general is that you can have all kinds of different threadings for a twill. So it's kind of cool that we're gonna pair up this unique threading with this unique pattern. And lastly, we're going to use a 2-2 twill to create our herringbone. Now, let's talk about what that means. A 2-2 twill refers to how many shafts are up and how many shafts are down at the same time. So when you're creating a herringbone, you are always going to have 2 shafts up and 2 shafts down, no matter where you are in the pattern. And this is a balanced twill. That means that your fabric is going to look the same on the top as it is on the bottom underneath. It's going to look the same, right? So let me kind of show you what that looks like when you have a 2-2 pattern. So I'm going to start off with lifting shafts 1 and 2. Ooh, squeak, don't mind the squeak. Okay, I'm going to start off with shafts 1 and 2. Now I'm going to take my shuttle using my floating selvages. I'm going to go over the first floating selvage and under the next one. That is always my pattern that I use. That's the order that I always do them in. Okay, so I have 1 and 2, shafts 1 and 2 are up and 3 and 4 are down. So pull this forward and then I'm going to move it just like you would any other twill. So then I'm going to go to 2 and 3. I'm going to shift it just over 1, always having 2 shafts that are up. Again, go over the floating selvage and then under it. Okay, next 3 and 4. You're starting to see the rhythm here, aren't you? And lastly, 4 and 1. So we always have 2 that are up, always have 2 that are down. All right, here, I'll bring you in really close so you can see what I just did. Do you see that? Isn't that cool? Herringbone is just, it's very hip. So let's kind of recap. To create a herringbone twill, we're going to need some floating selvages, right? We are going to need a broken twill threading. So as you're setting up your loom, that's one of the things you have to kind of pay attention to, is to make sure you're using a broken twill threading. And we are going to do a 2-2 twill. That means that no matter how we are creating the pattern, we always have 2 shafts up and 2 shafts down. That is always a sequence we're going to use. Now, as you saw in my little tiny example here, I just kind of went one direction. You can go the other direction. As you are threading your project, you can change up the size of your columns. You have lots of options where you can really get creative. But if it's your first time out, keep it really simple for yourself, right? Just 2 yarns or 2 shafts up and 2 shafts down, and then just kind of go through 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 1, and repeat, and just keep going and watch your very cool columns emerge in your fabric that are the hallmark of our herringbone pattern. All right, you guys, if you haven't tried some herringbone yet, I hope this gives you the confidence and the know-how to dive right in. Have a great week. Happy weaving. Hey, it's Chris with Acton Creative, and this is A Handwoven Experience. In today's episode, I'm going to be playing with pinwheels. Now, don't think pinwheel the cookie with the spiral in it. Think pinwheel the toy. It's on the stick, has the lightweight star kind of shape to it, and then it goes crazy when the wind catches it. Well, imagine taking that shape when it's not in motion and creating a pattern that looks just like it. That's what we're after today. So let's talk about how to create our own pinwheel fabric. Now, at the core of it, a pinwheel pattern is in a color and weave style. Now, if you aren't familiar with that phrase, color and weave, I just did an episode a couple back all about what that means to be in a color and weave style. But the bottom line is that it's all about the placement of the colors. The colors make the pattern come to life. So let's dive into that a little further, right? This is my pinwheel fabric that I'm working on, and you'll see, do you see the cool pinwheel shape in the red? But if you look, it's also there in the blue. So it acts kind of like an MC Escher drawing where it's one shape, but it interlocks with itself over and over again to create this very, very cool look. But the bottom line is this is a twill. That's all it is, my friends. And mine I'm using here is a 2-2 twill. Easy. You always have 2 shafts up and 2 shafts down to create this very cool effect. That is all it is. Now, because it's a twill, we're gonna need some floating selvages to make sure that our weft goes all the way to the edges of the fabric. And to create this effect, we need to be aware of the placement of the colors and the ratio of the colors. Okay, so let me tell you what I mean by that. So in the warp here, you'll see I've got two colors. I have a red and then a blue. Here, let me show you closer up here. These are my colors. I've got like a lipstick red and a pale blue. And I did them in stripes over and over again in kind of the body of the fabric right here. Now, to create this effect right here, I need to make sure that I use those same colors in my shuttles, in my weft. That's how this happens. Because, here's my evidence, because on the edges of my fabric here, I have two darker colors. I have a dark red and I have kind of a medium blue. And what you'll notice is that when I use these two colors with the darker ones, this just looks like a twill. It doesn't create that kind of cool pinwheel, spirally kind of look. No, no, no. This just looks like a twill here instead of creating the pinwheel effect. Now, we have to pay attention to color. We also have to pay attention to the ratio. And here's what I mean. My stripes here are 4 ends of each. So I have 4 ends of the light blue, 4 ends of the red. So when I go to weave my pattern, I'm gonna do 4 picks of the red and 4 picks of the light blue over and over again. So you get kind of a balanced weave. So you have the same kind of spacing going this way that you do this way. So let's just get to it. Let me show you what this looks like, shall we? Okay. Now, like I said, it is a 2-2 twill. So I'm always gonna have 2 shafts up and 2 shafts down. See that? So I'm gonna start with my red here is gonna go first. Now, like we talked about, my stripes in the warp are 4 ends each. So I'm gonna do 4 picks of each here. So let's start this. That's 1, 2. Now, part of what gets exciting here is that we have to manage 2 shuttles throughout the entire pattern. And let me show you kind of just what you're watching for here is that I have 2 shuttles on the same side of my loom here. And I want to make sure that I don't have really crazy loops on the end. So I'm just going to take my red and I'm just going to kind of wrap it around the blue and kind of catch it so that those loops stay nice and close to the fabric. So send this through. This is pick number 3. And this is pick number 4. Now, time to change colors. So I'm going to pick up my blue shuttle now and make sure it wraps around my red just to make sure that everything stays nice and cozy. So this is pick number 1. Always 2 shafts up and 2 shafts down. Always, always. I'll send it back through this way. This is pick number 3. I'm going to wrap it around my red to catch it. Oops, come back like that. And this is pick number 4. Voila. There we go. That's how you do pinwheel. It is just that simple, my friends. Now there's all kinds of variations of patterns on pinwheel, but it doesn't have to be crazy. I'm working on a 4 shaft loom. I've got 2 colors. Off you go. That's all you need. So just as a little recap, to create your own pinwheel pattern, what you'll need is 2 colors. That's the bare minimum, is 2 colors for this. You'll need to alternate them in the warp and the weft in the same kind of ratio. So if you have 4 ends of one color, then you have 4 picks of that same color to create the pinwheel effect. And it's just a twill. That is all you need to know. So I suggest you go forth and spin around with some pinwheel. That's what I suggest. It is a lot of fun, I promise. All right, my friend. Have a great week. Happy weaving.